All right. So today, I'm excited. So we get a kind of standalone message this morning. We had just finished and it's so funny that God works this way, but Dave's song, Eagle's Wings, we didn't even touch base. I didn't even touch base with him about what to sing, but it sings about this life that we live and how things can sometimes get sideways and how God tends to center us. And so this morning, or these last 2 weeks really, as I headed off to Go Camp 2 weekends ago and then entered into that first week of school. And if you remember last week, I was like, this is crazy. Schedules are crazy. But it just seems that sometimes in life, things don't always make sense, right? And that's on a wide arrangement of different situations. And so I came up with some things that just don't make sense to me. So as my kids head into high school they introduce letter grades, and I had letter grades growing up, A, B, C, D, and then you got an F, right? If you didn't do well, you got an F. Why do they skip E? You get A, B, C, D, and then you get an F. So they just left E out. That doesn't make any sense to me, right? Or how many of you have been to the dentist in the last few weeks? Last month or so? Just a few of us. Hopefully get your regular checkup. But why, when the dentist has got all that stuff in your mouth, why does he ask you questions? As if you're able to just talk and conversate with them, right? Why, when we say the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, elemental P, why do we speed up for elemental P all the time, right? You guys are saying it in your head, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, elemental P, Q, we speed up. We just speed up during that time, right? Or why is yawning contagious, right? Right? Why is yawning contagious? When you see somebody actually yawn and then you yawn, what's up with that? How does that work, right? What about traffic? Traffic's a good one. If everybody just did the speed limit, there would never be traffic. Everybody just keeps going, 35, don't slow down, right? Just go, right? There's no traffic then. Or the infamous egg and the chicken, which really did come first, right? Doesn't make sense, right? But I am finally glad that we got the whole daylight saving things figured out, right? Who's excited that we're not doing daylight savings anymore, right? And why couldn't we start that right now? We got to wait a whole year to kick that off. I just don't want to lose an hour of sleep again. But like that, and seriously like this, I think the other day I went to walk the egg, but I left my shoes with my hands because the wood was wet and I didn't eat my yogurt. So it was it was super confusing. Good, you guys got it. See, now you get a little bit of a glimpse of what my family has to deal with every single day. You guys just get a little of a glimpse of that on Sundays. But I think if we're honest with ourselves, how many of you, we're going to take a second, interact online, look to your neighbor on a scale of 1 to 10, how crazy is your life? Go ahead and let your neighbor know. 7, 5, right? 20? I heard it 20? Wow, 1 to 10. All right, 1 to 10 and we're hitting 20, right? So I think for me, the making sense thing is at a 7. Things make sense, but also craziness. But I think we're in good company because there's more than one time in the Bible that Jesus actually says, what I'm telling you right now doesn't make sense. It will in time. And you understand, he says that a couple times. To the point even where a lot of Jesus' teachings made sense to some, and he openly admitted that didn't make sense to some of the others. Some of what Jesus taught at different times didn't make sense to his closest of friends, the disciples, the 12 that he rolled with on a regular basis. Even some of what he said repeatedly over and over, the disciples were like, man, that doesn't make any sense. And so this morning I want to pose this question. How how many of you would say it's safe to say that there's an aspect or an area or a part of your life right now that doesn't necessarily make sense, right? Show of hands. Okay, we've got a few honest people in the room. But I think oftentimes we have an area or an aspect or a situation in our life that we just think, man, that just doesn't make sense to me. And I want to understand it more. I want to get to know it. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, a lot of the time, those parts of our lives connect with and are kind of have got some focus or centrality or some idea around things like hardship or things like stress, confusion, loss, things like inconvenience for us. They're oftentimes connected to areas of our lives those are what's often the areas of our lives that don't make sense. That's what they're connected to. And I ask myself the question, why does that happen? Why are we in that state of not understanding and not necessarily making sense? We just finished our series on Flourish, and so we looked at 7 spiritual practices, an effort for us to draw closer to God and what He desires for us, and that was John 15. And abide in me, and I in you. If the branch is connected to the vine, you will produce fruit. Like, just stay connected to God in those spiritual practices that we looked at, generosity and prayer and fasting and Sabbath and rest, and all those ones that we looked at. Those are an effort for us to connect with Him. And right after John 15, in John 16, Jesus' tone changes. He says, connect with me, stay with me, be close to me, you will produce fruit, love like I love. Like, he riddles this off in John 15. And then in John 16, the very next chapter, he starts talking about hardship. And he starts talking about how we're gonna face hardship. We're gonna face trials in our lives. There's people who are gonna go after you because they think it's the right thing to do. There's people that are gonna treat you differently. And all that stuff is going to happen in your life. Be prepared for it. And Jesus is talking over this, of this kind of age-old question is, why do bad things happen? Why do we enter that hardship? Why are we in trials sometimes? Jesus shares with the disciples at that time, as well as even before that time, that He's going to go. He's going to leave them physically. Like, physically, He was walking with His best friends. He's going to leave them, and then and the disciples focus on that. And Jesus says, don't focus on that. Don't focus on that, because I'm going to send you somebody that's going to be your guidance. I'm going to send you somebody that's going to lead you in. He's talking about the Holy Spirit. And that's that whole idea of God with us and continuing to be with us. And so that enters kind of into this John 16, where we're going to work through a little bit of John 16 and the start of John 17, but we're also going to be in James a little bit. But this idea of questioning, the idea of dealing with the loss, discomfort, dealing with questioning, dealing with sorrow. And church, I tell you, a lot of the same things, life, and over these last few weeks, I feel like I've landed in this. Life is hard, right? Raise your hand if life can be hard sometimes. Okay, a lot more honest people there. I've gotten you to the point. But life can be hard. And I think we all already know that. We all already know that. And I don't necessarily come here to tell you that, because honestly, we know that. But it seems like over these last few weeks, we've been resting on this idea of like our sinful nature, our desire to oftentimes, where we all fall short, and I'm going to be the first one to admit I fall short often, way too often, for it to be healthy. But God continues to desire us. And I think that that whole idea of focusing on that can oftentimes even spin us into even deeper, like, oh, woe is me, and the sorrow that we may feel. But we all are part of this broken, sinful lifestyle, the hardship, the circumstances, the loss, and the trial. My hope for us this morning is that we can figure out maybe and make some sense of that stuff. make some sense of what God's desire is for us coming out of that or walking through that in our lives. So we face and go through a lot of tough stuff in our lives. And like I said, I think oftentimes we become people who try to avoid that. At all costs, I'm going to avoid anything that is discomfort, that isn't comfortable to me. I'm going to, at all costs, try to avoid all hardship in my life. I'm going to even maybe run from, kind of brush it under the rug. I'm going to do whatever it is that I don't have to deal with, work through, or enter into those hard aspects and areas of my life. But what if it isn't God's desire for us to avoid that stuff? What if for us it's actually understanding that even in the middle of all that stuff, it's God's proximity and his desire to stay with us, to be close to us, to never leave us, right? What if, when we think about those things, we think of less about avoidance, running from, all that, and we think of, man, this is a point where I need to understand the proximity of God and what he desires for me in my life and his willingness to stay in that area with us. John 16:1 says this, I have said all these things to keep you from falling away. And what it says there in Scripture is this idea of, and I love that the chapter 16 starts out this way. What it doesn't say is, I've said all these things so that you can avoid all hardship in your life. It says, I've said all these things to keep you from falling away. And what it's saying there is God's saying, I ain't leaving. I'm with you. But oftentimes what happens in our lives is that the hardships and the things that we face cause us to lose sight of the proximity in the presence of God. Because we can question it, we can be distracted from it, we can just lose sight of it, we can get all spun around sideways in it, we can take the route of, man, this doesn't make sense if God's like this, and how could he be like this? There's so much for us, and that verse says to keep us from falling away. And I love that God emphasizes that he ain't going nowhere. Cover to cover, God tells, I'm with you till the end of the days. I'm going to be with you. I'll send my Spirit to be with you. I'm with you through the hardships. I'll walk you through the trials. I will always be with you. So it's not about avoiding the behavior, the sin, the feelings, although that is great. It's understanding that God's proximity to us and not falling away. So hang with me in this. I think we become a people where we try to make sense of everything. We want to have an understanding and make sense of everything in our lives because that makes it easy for us, right? That makes it, if I understand and can make sense of it all, then I'm in a good spot, right? But church, what if our ability to make sense of things actually equates to not having to have faith in God in it? Because if it makes sense to me, I don't have to trust God with it. I don't have to enter into that conversation and be like, God, I don't know what's going on, but I know you do, and I've just got to trust you right now. As opposed to saying, man, well, I mean, that's that way because this, that, and the other thing, and if I just stay away, I can explain myself and make sense to it, but it allows me then to not develop the faith and the trust and really press into who God is. And how he's entered into this time with me. I'm not much of a plant guy, okay? At our house, cut flowers are great. You can bring flowers for my wife, that'd be great. They last, the week or two that we get them, and it's great. But when it comes to plants, we tend to kill them. We lost a plant this week, and rest in peace. Plant that we've had for a while too, and it was a really nice plant. But, things happen. But I say that because there's this theory that's out there, and it's actually, I got it on a rabbit trail. You know when you click on something and you're reading, you're like, whoa, and then you click on another thing, and you're like 2 hours later, you're reading about like plants and all these different studies that go on. University of Massachusetts, UMass, did a study, the Department of Plant and Science. I read all these things. The Burlington Greenhouses had this part of their website where they talked about it too, but there's this idea of the greenhouse effect and not the political one. Greenhouse effect and the idea of a plant that is produced in greenhouses with the perfect environment and the perfect scenarios that oftentimes will go out to development or make it to the hardware store where we buy it and all that kind of stuff, or trees that are produced. If they stay too long in that environment, their root system grows sideways. It doesn't go deep. And so there was actually a study, Biosphere, where there was a study, but where they produced these plants and these trees would just topple over because they weren't exposed to the wind. They weren't exposed to the harsh environment. They weren't exposed to a winter over rain of the Pacific Northwest, or they weren't exposed to all of the elements that allow the tree to grow deep in its root system and establish a foundation that would cause it not to topple over. And all these places did these studies to produce like the exact amount of time that they can be in the greenhouse, and then they've got to be developed and sent out so that they can develop in the wild and form that root system that grows down and takes root and allows the plants to be able to sustain in all of the weathers and the different kind of scenarios that it will face when it goes home to our houses. But what if, and it's really not a what if our life in growth and relationship pertain to that as well? That the trials and the things that we're faced with, the confusion, everything not making sense, all of that stuff, what if that equated, instead of my idea of making sense of everything and explaining things out to the best of my ability, try to avoid things at all costs, those things in our lives, those situations, hardships, shortcomings, what if they were actually opportunities for us in growth in our relationship with God, our faith and trust in Him? That as we face trials in our lives, as we walk through the wind and rain, as we actually have the ability to take part of a process, that taking part in those trials and things that we face actually grow us deeper in our relationship with the Creator, who desires for us to trust Him, have faith in Him, to hear Him, to feel His presence. That those areas in our lives that are tough, that are hard, that they produce us to grow deeper, that they connect us stronger to the one that created each one of us. James 1, verses 2 through 4 says this: "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whether you face trials of any kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." So my buddy Brian, pastors at CTK Bellingham in town, they're doing a series on James, and so I tuned into that, and I got this little bit from him. But he, in teaching this, and we'll go a little bit different route than he did, but he teaches, this is a verse you probably heard before. Consider it pure joy that you're going through hard times. He reminded me that this isn't the way we often can use this verse, is if we have a friend who's going through hard times, we're like, hey, here's this verse I got for you. Consider it pure joy that you're going through a hard time. Don't do that, all right? This is a precursor to allowing God in and Him being a part of it, and then when He's in there, we get to consider it pure joy. And so this isn't the verse you send to somebody when they're going through a tough time. Better to come alongside them, love on them, care for them, and show them, display Jesus' love rather than be like, hey, it's joy that you're really struggling. But, all right, that being said, but through trials, through through the trials that we face, it produces faith. And in that verse, it actually says it produces steadfastness, the ability to stick with and trust in our God. That in all honesty, aside from facing trials, really hard to produce faith. I was trying to make sense of what does it mean for me to be able to produce faith in my life? Well, for me to produce faith in my life, I actually have to have a situation where I need to put my faith in God. If I don't have situations in my life where I have to put my faith in God, I think I question my faith. Because I have to. So I think oftentimes we desire to have huge faith. Like God is our creator. He's the creator of all things. He desires the best for us. He was present at creation. He's present at the end and everything in between. He's in control. So I want to put all my faith, I want a huge faith in God. But when I say I want huge faith in God, that actually means I probably have to have areas in my life where I have to have huge faith in God, which would then include or actually be, I don't know, I mean, I would love to hear afterwards. I'd love to hear what your guys' example of producing faith, separate from needing to have faith, might be, right? Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whatever you face, trials of many kinds, because you know, that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And I question that because I love the way it's worded there, because you know this, right? I don't know that I knew this. I know that I probably didn't desire it, but it says there, because you know the testing of your faith produces the perseverance. It comes in the ability to get out there and get in and enter into the development and growth of our lives, to go after it, to face our trials, to work through them, because we know that the testing of those things will produce the perseverance. Church, if you think about it, I've put it this way before. I'm going to share two analogies about it. It's been years, but I shared this with you guys before many years ago. There's the ability for me to tell my kids to go clean their room, right? Colby, go clean your room. And there's the option that Colby or Micah or whoever has to go and clean their room. But then there is that option where they don't go clean their room, which happens more times than not. But if I think about it, if I tell Colby to go clean his room, and he's like, yeah, Dad, I went down into my room, I got on my computer, and I Googled how to clean my room. And he found out all the best ways to clean my room. And then I invited my friends over, and we talked about what it would be like to clean my room, you know? But he actually didn't get to the point of getting it done, right? There's a difference. In this situation, actually getting in there and facing and walking through the trials with God produces that faith and trust. When in actuality, if I ask Colby to clean his room and he just doesn't do it, that doesn't produce anything other than his knowledge of said clean room processes, right? And again, Brian put it this way, it's football season, so, and I had a challenge. Josh isn't up here. Josh challenged me with a cool video this week to really dive into the word and use less analogies. So I added extra analogies this week. And being that it's football season, you guys get football analogies. I've held out a long time, and so we're going to enter into some of that. But here's the deal. It's my first football analogy, so I apologize for those of you but I think you're going to understand it. So Monday Night Football, Seahawks Broncos, right? So Russell Wilson, quarterback for the Broncos. Now he was the quarterback for the Seahawks, and he's coming back to hometown first game, and they're playing Monday Night Football, super primetime game. So what if the team got together on Monday and did the rah-rah like Pete Carroll delivered the epic talk for the Seahawks, and then they ran out of the huddle, ran out of the locker room, and got in their cars and went home. And then they talked about how great that speech was and how motivating it was, and woohoo, that's great, right? There'd be nothing accomplished. Or what if instead of they huddled up and they broke their little huddle and they got together, talked about the play and what they should do and how they should execute it, and then they broke the huddle and they hit the showers, showered up, and went home, right? They wouldn't accomplish anything. And I think that when we break that huddle of accomplishment, instead of, and I think oftentimes for us, instead of a series of huddles and speeches, where then we just broke off and went home, what if we actually entered into really working through the things that God desires for us to do, right? What if it was God's desire for us to actually put into process the things and ways that he's leading us into and through these trials in our lives? She desired for us to work through these things. That instead of a series of huddles and speeches where we actually entered into that game, entered into the game which was for us life, and applied and walked with God through all this stuff, learning lessons along the way. You saw me in my Broncos jersey. I hope the Broncos win. But I also hope that the Seahawks learn a lot from their loss, right? Because we can learn a lot. We can learn a lot from the losses in our life. We can. The areas of our life where we have the most growth and understanding come from the hardships that we've been through, come from the perseverance, come from the restoration, come from all those things in our life that we've literally walked with God through, that He's accomplished through us, for us to then learn and grow in those areas in our lives. Right? James 1:22 says, "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says." Do not merely listen to the words. Do not merely listen to the play call. Do not merely huddle up. Do not merely get together and talk about it, but actually get out there and do what it says. I always joke about, because you know me, like, if you're hanging your weight on your spiritual growth on the 35, 40 minutes I give you on Sunday morning, good luck. You're going to need it. I'll be praying for you. That was a really strong laugh. But honestly, we need to get out there and know God's truth and actually act it out in our lives. But I joke about that. Oh, man, I hope it makes it to the parking lot on Monday, or I hope it makes it to Wednesday. Man, I was talking to somebody about my sermon on Thursday. How great is that? And it's great to be like, oh, Jason said something funny, or he said something witty, or he had that one thing and you think about it all week. That's great. I mean, that's great. But what if we actually took whatever God is, and hopefully a lot more than what I'm saying, and we actually took it and put it into practice immediately? Just we focused on it, and then we walked forward into it, and we maybe took a new mindset on it and approached something directly and started the work that God desired for us. Right? It isn't about it being on your mind constantly. It's whether or not you go out and do it. Whether or not you go out and act that out in this game of life, in this game of whatever that you're facing. And I tell you what, we already established, it's not always easy, but the not easy produces a faith and trust, and that faith and trust produces perseverance and growth, right? So here's warning, my second football analogy of the day. Sorry, Josh. My second football analogy of the day is, how many of you caught Thursday night football? Oh, wow, okay. Michelle, sorry. Just me and you. All right, so this will be the last Sunday I use any football analogies. If you don't know, the Rams in the what? The Bills played each other. So last year, the Rams won the Super Bowl, right? They killed it. They won the Super Bowl, and it was great, right? And so this year, power rankings come out, and that's like they rank the teams 1 to 32, or however many teams there are. Seahawks are second to last, I think, right now. Broncos are like 10th, so they're not even way up there either. But they come out on Thursday, and power rankings say the Rams are number 1, and they're going to kill it, right? Fresh off a Super Bowl victory, brought a lot of players back, even signed some players, lost a couple players, but they feel like, in like most of the analysis Analysts picked them to win and all this kind of stuff. But they came out and lost. The Buffalo Bills just stuck it to them. I mean, it was one-sided. The Buffalo Bills just killed it out there. If you remember, which you don't because only Michelle and I watch football, last year when the Buffalo Bills lost, their receiver Stephon Diggs, which is a really good receiver, stayed out on the field solo, standing in the end zone, watching the Rams watching at the time Chiefs celebrate when they lost. They were going to play to go to the Super Bowl and they lost. So man, that was the best game to watch of the year. But he stood out there and watched them celebrate, and he produced this desire inside of him. And what happened is the Bills came out hungry. The Bills came out hungry to win, and the Rams came out, we're Super Bowl champs. Like we won last year, so we're actually sitting pretty. And they just got rolled over, all right? So church, when we experience God, when we enter in, and I'm bringing it around. Sorry, I won't do football analogies anymore. But when we experience God, when we experience his faithfulness, when we actually enter into that trust, when we actually walk through those areas of our lives that are tough, and we allow him into those areas, it produces a hunger and a desire to continue to work for those things, to continue to desire those things, to continue to have our Creator, the living God, walk us and make sense of it and like comfort us, to walk us through. Like when we do that, it actually produces, when we allow his rules and his guidelines, when we press into the way he created us, when we enter into those things, it produces a hunger and a desire for more of that, for more trust and more faith. When we break a huddle and we have confidence that when we walk through these doors, when we have confidence that there's faith in the game plan that God has for us, that hopefully if I've done my job, I've gotten out of the way and God's spoken to you personally in some way, and then when you walk out these doors, you take whatever that is that God said to you, apply it to your life, and walk with confidence in it. And the more we do that, the more we hunger and desire that in our lives. The more truth we know, and we want to take that with us. How often do we get through life, good, bad, or sideways, and we get through it and we have the confidence and then just go out on our own, right? Like we've overcome something, or we've done something in our lives, and then we're like, I got it from here, and then we just kind of mosey away from God. We're in the habit of doing that because we think, we got there now, I'm set. I can handle it from here. This is the lifestyle that I tend to fall into, right? Instead of continuing to desire and want that. So my church, my question for you is, what do you hunger for? What do you hunger for in your life? To get you, is it to get through life unscathed? Like, I just got to get through life. No more hardships, no more tough things to walk through. I'm going to avoid all that at all costs. Right? Avoid conflict. To be able to explain everything. To when we experience God through all of that, it increases our hunger for more. Our hunger for his plan, our hunger for more perseverance, as it said in James. Our hunger for more faith to navigate through life. And ultimately, it's to bring glory to the Creator, the author, the one that desires the best for each one of us, even through the hardship. Back to John 17:1 says this. After Jesus said this, and you got to know that this comes at a time, John 17 is like Jesus' final hours, Jesus' final stage of life. He knows what's coming. He's told the disciples multiple times, I'm gonna die, all this kind of stuff. So at this point, John 17, Jesus prays a prayer. He prays a prayer for himself. He prays a prayer for the believers, and then he prays a prayer for those that will come to know him in faith. It's a pretty cool, go read John 16 and 17. It goes really well together. But as does the whole Bible. But he says this, John 17:1. After Jesus said this, he looked toward heaven and prayed, Father, the hour has come. Glorify your Son, that your Son might glorify you. Right? Jesus right here starts the succession of prayers where he prays for himself, he prays for others, and he prays for those that are going to come to know him in faith. And I think we think of glory, like glorify your Son. We think of glory when it comes to like me is like, I want to be famous. Sure, famous enough. So this is the play on I don't want any fame to God. I've got enough fame. I want to give all the fame to God. That's the play on the shirt. And I didn't actually wear it on purpose. So glory to us means elevate me. Elevate me. I want to be elevated. I'm kind of a big deal. Put me up on a pedestal. That's the way we think of like glory for me, right? But Jesus in this prayer, when he starts this off and says, he says, glorify your Son so that you may be glorified, so that God may be glorified. Glory to Jesus isn't about lifting him up. It isn't about worshiping in this moment. It isn't about worship me, elevate me. It's actually, he'll be lifted up is a reference to that he will be crucified on the cross. But bring glory is the idea of him not saying glorify myself, him saying, God, use me, God, break me, God, bruise me, God, crucify me, beat me. All the things that Jesus endured in that last moment, that is the glory that is coming to God. And that through God, use me any way possible. If there's another way, we can go that route, but if not, then I'm here. Glory to you through this moment. Right? Do whatever you do to bring you glory. That's the glory that Jesus is talking about. And that's honestly the glory that we can enter into with God as well. God, whatever it is, use me. God, what's going on in my life right now, use me. Whatever, I know it's not going to be easy right now. It's pretty easy, so I'm pretty sure we're going to enter into some times where I'm going to need to put my faith, hope, and trust in you. But God, use me. Use me. Whatever it is you need to glorify yourself, I'm game. That mentality of entering into that with God. This is as Jesus faced the cross and as he faced the beating, as he faced the everything he was going to go through for each one of us. His prayer was, God, the glory is all yours. Right? And that's the prayer that Jesus prayed for us, those who believe. He prayed it for himself, like he wanted God to know that. He prayed that for us. And he prayed for those that have yet to know it yet, that have yet to know him. And so, church, I want to challenge you, instead of in life trying to make sense of everything, trying to avoid the different areas and tough things in our lives, I want to challenge you to allow God to make sense of it all. To allow God to enter in and allow yourself to just have faith and trust him in it. It's for a season, and it's for his glory. I'm going to invite the band to come forward. And as they do, I'm going to close in prayer for us. Lord, as much as I want to know all of the answers, the outcomes, the what is to come, Lord, I know for me, that gets me off the hook of putting my faith in you. And so this morning, I pray for us, Lord, that we would allow you to work in our lives. Lord, whatever we're facing, whatever we brought with us today, whatever season we're in life, Lord, will you help us to put our faith in you, Lord? And Lord, may it be a tangible step we take right now. That as we go from here and we enter into the routine of life, as Michelle and I enter in to go home and watch some football, Lord, as we all enter in to go into house or life or however it may be, Lord, that we wouldn't just think, oh, that was a good time together, Lord, but that we would actually enter into a time where we have allowed, or in these next two closing songs, we will allow you to speak to each one of us. And whatever that is, Lord, I pray that we put our faith in that. Lord, and that as we walk from here, we put into action faith and trust that produces the perseverance to get us through whatever it is that we're going to face in life, Lord. Because I can't make sense of it. It's too much work. Lord, we love you and we trust you. We pray this in your name. Amen. Amen. Worship together.